When I first met Ethan, I honestly thought I'd won the lottery of love. He was everything I thought a good man should be: charming, attentive, funny, and just the right amount of mysterious. We met at a small art gallery downtown. I wasn't even supposed to be there that night. My best friend, Olivia, dragged me out because she said I needed to stop moping about my last breakup. I remember standing near a painting I didn't understand when Ethan walked up and started explaining what he thought it meant. His voice was soft but confident, and his blue eyes had this calmness in them that made me feel safe. We talked for hours that night. He told me he was a project manager at a construction firm, recently transferred to the area for work. He didn't talk too much about his past, but at the time, I liked that. It made him seem mature, like someone who didn't live for drama. When he asked for my number, I said yes without hesitation. Our first few months together were perfect, maybe too perfect. He always texted good morning and called every night before bed. He'd surprise me with small things: coffee waiting outside my door before work, flowers showing up at my office for no reason, a note in my bag saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight." My friends told me he was a keeper. Even my mom liked him, which was rare. She said, "He looks at you like you're his whole world." I believed that. I really did. About 6 months into dating, Ethan started spending a few weekends away for work trips. He said his company had a big development project in another city, and sometimes he needed to be on site. I never questioned it. He always FaceTimed me when he could, and he never gave me a reason not to trust him. I wasn't naive. I'd been cheated on before. But something about Ethan felt solid, real. Then came the proposal. He took me to a lake house one weekend, one he said belonged to a coworker who wasn't using it. The evening was beautiful. The sky was painted orange and pink, and we were sitting on the dock drinking wine. When he got down on one knee, I was completely caught off guard. I cried so hard I barely heard him ask the question. Of course I said yes. It felt like everything in my life was finally falling into place. After that, we started planning the wedding. He said he didn't have a big family, just his mom and an older brother who lived out of state. He told me his father had passed away years ago. Whenever I asked about meeting his mom, he'd say she wasn't in good health and didn't travel much. I accepted that. I figured I'd meet her eventually. Then little things started to feel off. The first red flag came when I noticed he always turned his phone face down when we were together. It wasn't something he used to do. Once, when I asked about it, he laughed it off and said he didn't want notifications distracting us. I wanted to believe him, but doubt has a funny way of sticking around once it sneaks in. A few weeks later, I called him one night after work, but instead of answering, he sent a quick text saying, "In a meeting, can I call you later?" That wasn't unusual, except this time I heard a baby crying in the background of the text notification sound. It was faint, but unmistakable. When I asked about it later, he claimed he was at a client's house and they had kids. I accepted the explanation, even though something deep inside me didn't feel right. Around that time, Olivia began noticing things too. She said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but doesn't it bother you that you've never been to his place?" I brushed it off at first. Ethan said his apartment was being renovated and he'd been staying at a corporate rental. I didn't want to be that clingy fiancé who demanded to see every corner of his life. But the seed of doubt had been planted. One Saturday, he told me he had to go out of town for another project meeting. He kissed me goodbye and promised to FaceTime when he got there. But that night, he didn't call. Not once. I texted, I called, nothing. The next morning, he finally sent a message. "Sorry, long day. Fell asleep early." The message came at 6:42 a.m., and it felt off. I couldn't explain it, but it didn't sound like him. That was when I made the first real mistake. I decided to snoop. I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. So, the next time he came over, I pretended to be asleep while he showered, and I went through his jacket pocket. Inside was a small receipt from a grocery store, but not one near our area. It was from a town nearly 2 hours away, and the items listed were odd. Baby formula, diapers, and women's vitamins. My heart started racing. Maybe he was shopping for a friend. Maybe it was for his sick mom. But why didn't he mention it? I took a picture of the receipt and put it back exactly where I found it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every possible explanation ran through my mind, but none made sense. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I searched the grocery store's name online, then used a people search website to check if Ethan's name was linked to that town. It was. There was a listed address under his name, a small house in a quiet neighborhood. I sat there, staring at the screen for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself it was a mistake. But curiosity and fear won. That weekend, I told Ethan I was going to visit my cousin for the day. Instead, I drove 2 hours to that address. When I got there, I parked down the street and just watched. A few minutes later, the front door opened. Ethan walked out, holding a toddler. A little girl, maybe 2 years old. And then a woman stepped outside, holding a baby. She kissed him, not on the cheek, on the lips, like it was completely normal. My body went cold. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. I took a picture, not even sure why. Maybe I just needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I sat there in the car, frozen, as he helped the woman load the kids into a car. He looked happy, comfortable, like a man with a family. And then it hit me, he did have a family. When I got home, I didn't cry. Not right away. I felt numb, like my brain refused to process what I'd just seen. I didn't confront him that night. I wanted to think. I needed to be smart about it. He texted me, saying he missed me, asking how my day was. I replied like everything was normal, but deep down, something inside me had broken. The next morning, I decided I would find out everything. Who that woman was, who the kids were, and why he had built an entire life with me while hiding another one somewhere else. I didn't know it yet, but what I was about to uncover would be worse than I ever imagined. That night, after I saw Ethan with that woman and those kids, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the same smile he gave me when he proposed, now aimed at someone else. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was helping out a relative. Maybe he was mentoring a single mom he knew from work. My mind came up with a dozen excuses, but my heart knew better. By morning, my confusion had turned into determination. I needed the truth. Not guesses, not theories, the truth. The next day, I called out of work and decided to dig. I still had the picture of the house and the woman, so I started there. The house had a small number on the mailbox, and using that, I pulled up the county property records online. It took less than 5 minutes to find it. The name listed under the property owners stopped my heart cold. Ethan Mitchell and Rebecca Mitchell. Rebecca, his wife. He wasn't just living a double life, he was married with kids. I remember my stomach twisting as I stared at the screen. There it was, black and white proof that my fiancé was actually someone else's husband. I sat there for a long time before I started shaking. It wasn't sadness at first, it was disbelief, this sick feeling that I'd somehow become the other woman without even knowing it. Eventually, anger started to creep in. I wanted answers. I wanted to hear him lie to my face one last time so I could throw the truth right back at him. So I made a plan. That evening, when he texted to say he'd be working late, I played along. "Okay, babe, don't stay too long," I wrote. I even added a heart emoji, just to keep things normal. But instead of waiting at home, I drove back to that same neighborhood, the one 2 hours away. I parked at a coffee shop down the street where I could see the house through the window. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. Around 7, I saw his car pull into the driveway. He got out, kissed that woman again, and carried the little girl inside. I sat there for an hour, watching lights turn on, hearing faint laughter drift out from the backyard. It was domestic, peaceful, and I was the ghost sitting outside their perfect life. I didn't confront him that night. Not yet. I needed to think smarter than that. The next day, I called Olivia. She was the only person I trusted enough to tell. When I said the words out loud, "Ethan has a wife and 2 kids," I started crying. Olivia listened quietly for a moment and then said, "Okay, we're going to handle this right. Don't do anything crazy. Let's gather everything first." So we did. We spent hours digging through social media. I found Rebecca's profile easily. It was private, but her profile picture showed her, Ethan, and their 2 kids at a pumpkin patch. The date on the post? 2 weeks before he proposed to me. My chest felt tight as I scrolled. There were other pictures too. Vacations, birthdays, family dinners. He looked happy in every single one. He'd told me he didn't have social media because he didn't like being online. That was a lie. He had a whole other life online. I kept scrolling until I found something that made my blood run cold. A post from Rebecca 3 years ago with the caption, "Happy anniversary to my best friend and husband, Ethan. Here's to forever." They'd been married long before he ever met me. At that point, the shock was gone. I just felt hollow. I wanted to scream, to throw something. All I could do was sit there in silence. Olivia finally said, "You need to confront him, but you have to be careful. Guys like this, they're good liars. Don't give him a chance to twist it." She was right. Ethan was clever, smooth. He could talk his way out of almost anything. So I decided to set a trap. The next time we met, I invited him over for dinner. I cooked his favorite meal, pasta carbonara, and lit candles like nothing was wrong. He kissed me when he walked in, said I smelled amazing. I wanted to slap him, but I forced myself to stay calm. We ate, we talked, and he told me about another business trip coming up. That was my cue. I looked at him and said softly, "Do you ever think about what our future will really look like? You know, after we're married?" He smiled, leaned back, and said, "Of course. You'll be my wife, we'll buy a house, have kids, maybe 2 or 3. I nodded slowly. "And what about the 2 you already have?" His smile froze. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed, like he thought it was a joke. "What are you talking about?" I took out my phone and laid it on the table. The picture of him, the woman, and the kids glowed on the screen. His face changed instantly. The blood drained out, his jaw tightened. He didn't say a word. "Say something?" I whispered. He took a long breath and said, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Then what is it, Ethan? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my fiancé has a whole wife and family living 2 hours away." He rubbed his temples, sighing like he was the victim. "Rebecca and I are complicated. We're separated. I just haven't told you because I didn't want to drag that mess into our relationship." "Separated?" I said. "You live with her. You kissed her. You bought baby formula last week." His eyes flicked up sharply, realizing I'd gone through his things. "You went through my stuff? Oh, don't you dare flip this on me. I wouldn't have to dig if you weren't a liar." He stood up then, trying to sound calm. "I was going to tell you, I swear. I just needed to get things finalized first. The marriage is over, but the divorce paperwork is taking time." I wanted to believe him so badly. Even after everything, part of me still hoped there was some way to make sense of it. "Show me," I said. "Show me the papers." He hesitated, just a second too long. Then he said, "I can't, not yet." That was it. That was the moment I knew he was still lying. I stood up, grabbed the engagement ring from my finger, and threw it at him. "We're done. I don't ever want to see you again." He tried to stop me, reaching out to grab my arm, but I yanked away.
His voice changed, no longer calm, now desperate. "You don't understand, Emily. You don't know what's going on." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're right. I don't understand how you could look me in the eye and build a life with me while tucking your kids into bed every night somewhere else." Then I walked out. He called me for days after that, texted, emailed, even showed up at my office once. I ignored every message. Olivia told me to block him, and eventually I did. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. I'd move on, lick my wounds, and learn from my mistake. But about 2 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a printed message that said, "You should have stayed out of it." No signature, no explanation. And from that moment, everything got worse.
The envelope sat on my kitchen table for hours before I could bring myself to touch it again. I must have read that single line 100 times. You should have stayed out of it. The words didn't sound like a random threat. They felt personal, specific, like someone knew exactly what I had done, what I had discovered, and was warning me to back off. At first, I thought maybe it was Ethan. Maybe he was angry that I had exposed him. But the tone didn't fit him. Ethan was a liar, sure, but he was never direct. He always tried to manipulate, twist, and gaslight his way through a situation. This message was cold and straightforward, like someone else had written it, someone who wanted to scare me. I called Olivia right away. "Liv, I think someone's threatening me." She came over immediately. When I showed her the paper, she frowned. "This is insane. Do you think it's Ethan?" "I don't know, but who else would send something like this?" She took a photo of the note on her phone. "You should file a police report. Even if it's nothing, at least it's documented." I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to turn this into a public mess. But she was right. If something happened later, I needed proof. So that afternoon, I went down to the police station and filed a report. The officer took my statement, looked at the letter, and said they'd keep it on file but couldn't do much without more evidence. I didn't expect them to. For the next few days, I tried to go back to normal. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe not. Every car that slowed near my apartment made my stomach clench. Every unknown number that called made my pulse race. Then, one night, as I was leaving work, I saw something that confirmed my fear. Ethan's car. It was parked across the street from my office building, half hidden behind a row of trees. The same silver sedan I'd ridden in 100 times. The same dent on the rear bumper I'd teased him about fixing. I froze. My first instinct was to walk the other way, but something inside me refused to keep running from him. So I pulled out my phone, snapped a quick picture, and started walking straight toward the car. But as I got closer, it pulled away. Slowly, like the driver wanted me to see it leaving. My heart was pounding by the time I got home. I texted Olivia. "He was outside my work today." She called me immediately. "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. When she arrived, I showed her the photo of his car. She sighed, pacing the room. "He's trying to scare you. He knows he can't talk his way back in, so he's doing this to make you panic." That night, we double-checked my locks and made sure all my curtains were drawn in. Olivia insisted on sleeping on my couch. We stayed up late, drinking wine, scrolling through every bit of online information we could find about him. And that's when we found something strange. Ethan Mitchell didn't seem to exist, not officially. The only traceable records under that name were tied to the address where Rebecca lived. There were no college records, no past addresses, nothing from before 7 years ago. It was like he'd appeared out of thin air. Olivia frowned. "That's not normal.
Everyone has some sort of trail. High school, jobs, something. I felt my throat tighten. What if Ethan Mitchell isn't even his real name? The thought made my stomach twist. Who had I been living with, loving, trusting? The next day, I called out sick from work and drove to the town where his family lived. I parked on a different street this time, far enough away not to be noticed. I didn't plan on confronting anyone. I just needed to see, to understand. After a while, Rebecca
Came outside with the kids. She looked tired, like a woman trying to keep everything together. The toddler was clinging to her leg and the baby was crying in her arms. It hit me that she was probably just as much of a victim as I was. On impulse, I got out of my car and walked toward her. She noticed me immediately, confused but polite. "Hi, can I help you?" I hesitated, heart hammering. "Rebecca?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, do I know you?" My throat felt dry. "No, but I think we both know Ethan." The look on her face shifted instantly, confusion melting into dread. She whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't want to do this in front of her kids, so I offered to come back later. To my surprise, she said, "No, wait here." She took the kids inside, then came back out and shut the door behind her. We stood on her porch for a moment before she said quietly, "You're the fiancé, aren't you?" The way she said it made my heart drop. "You knew?" She nodded weakly. "Not at first, but I found out a few months ago. He told me he was traveling for work, but then I found your picture in his phone. I was going to reach out to you, but I didn't know how. I was scared." My knees nearly buckled. "Why didn't you leave him?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I tried, but Ethan isn't who you think he is. He's not just lying about being married." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, looking around like she was afraid someone might hear. "He's been using fake names for years. Ethan Mitchell isn't real. His real name is Eric Daniels. He changes his identity every few years. New job, new place, new story. I only found out when I saw old mail with a different name on it." I felt dizzy. Why would he do that? Rebecca's voice dropped lower. "Because he's running from something. He told me once that he owed people money, that he got caught in some business deal gone bad. But after I started digging, I realized it wasn't just money. It was fraud. He's been conning people, women, for years." I couldn't breathe. "You mean he's a scammer?" She nodded. "He finds women, builds a relationship, gets them to trust him, then takes what he needs, money, connections, whatever, and disappears. I think you were supposed to be the next one." My stomach turned. "Oh my God." Rebecca looked terrified. "After you confronted him, he's been angry. He said you ruined everything. That's why you got that letter. He thinks you're going to expose him." I stared at her. "He threatened me?" She nodded again. "He told me he'd handle it. I didn't know what that meant until now." The world felt like it was spinning. I thanked her, told her I'd handle it, and drove straight back to my apartment. The entire drive, my hands were shaking. I could barely focus. When I got home, I called Olivia again and told her everything. She went silent for a long moment before saying, "We have to go to the police again. This isn't just cheating anymore. This guy is dangerous." We did. This time when I gave the police the new information, his fake names, his possible fraud history, they took it seriously. They opened an investigation. But that night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I realized something chilling. If Ethan was capable of lying about his name, his life, and his family, what else was he capable of? And more importantly, how far would he go to stop me from telling the truth?
The days following my second visit to the police station felt like living in a thriller I never signed up for. I jumped at every sound. Every knock at the door made my heart race. I stopped going out after dark, and even had Olivia stay over most nights. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was self-preservation. The police had opened an official file on Ethan, or rather Eric Daniels, but they warned me that these things take time. Fraud cases, identity theft, they're complicated. All I could do was wait. Waiting, however, was torture. One evening, while scrolling through my emails, I found one from an unfamiliar address. The subject line simply read, "You don't know who you're messing with." I froze. My mouse hovered over the message for a long moment before I opened it. Inside was a single line. "Stop talking to the cops or you'll regret it." No signature, no name, but I knew exactly who it was. I forwarded it immediately to the detective handling the case, a woman named Detective Carter. She replied within minutes, telling me not to respond and to keep all future messages. They'd try to trace it, but she warned that if he was good at hiding his identity, he might have used an encrypted or temporary email service. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how someone like Ethan, Eric, had managed to build an entire life out of lies and no one had caught him. How many women had fallen for him before me? How many others had been left with broken hearts, empty bank accounts, and fear in their stomachs? I wasn't going to be one of them. So I started digging on my own. If he'd lied about his name and background, maybe I could find traces of his old life somewhere online. I used every tool I could: public records, reverse image searches, even old professional networking sites. And then, one night, I found something. An old corporate profile under the name Eric Daniels, listed as a regional sales director for a company that went bankrupt 5 years ago after an embezzlement scandal. I clicked on the archived page, and there he was. Same face, same smile. My blood went cold. I printed everything: the profile, the news article about the bankruptcy, even the comments where former employees hinted that someone at the top vanished with the money. I sent it all to Detective Carter. 2 days later, she called me into the station. When I arrived, she spread the papers out on her desk and looked at me seriously. "Emily, you might have just connected us to something much bigger." She explained that Eric Daniels was linked to at least 3 fraud investigations in different states, all involving women who'd filed reports about missing money or stolen identities after dating him. One had even lost her house after co-signing a loan for him. Another had disappeared entirely. Disappeared? I repeated, my voice trembling. Carter nodded grimly. "We haven't confirmed what happened to her, but after she filed a complaint, she moved suddenly, and no one's been able to contact her since." My chest tightened. "You think he hurt her?" "We don't know yet," she said carefully, "but I need you to be extremely cautious. Don't be alone if you can avoid it. If he reaches out, don't engage. Call us immediately." I left the station shaking. The idea that the man I once planned to marry could be dangerous enough to make someone disappear didn't feel real. But deep down, something told me it was possible. I'd seen the darkness in him that night when I confronted him. It had been buried under charm, but it was there. That weekend, Olivia and I went to stay with my mom. It wasn't easy explaining everything to her, but when she saw the fear in my face, she didn't ask many questions. She just said, "We'll get through this. You're not alone." For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no emails, no strange cars outside. I started to think maybe the police had scared him off. Maybe he'd gone underground again, changed his name, and vanished like he'd done before. Then on the 4th night, my phone rang at 2:17 a.m. It was a video call from an unknown number. Half asleep, I almost ignored it. But something inside me said to look. When I answered, my screen was dark for a few seconds. Then the camera flipped and I saw Ethan's face. He was sitting in a car, his eyes cold and wild. "You shouldn't have gone to the cops, Emily," he said quietly. "You made a big mistake." My blood turned to ice. "Where are you?" He smirked. "Close enough." Before I could respond, the camera tilted, showing a street sign, the one at the corner near my mother's house. My heart stopped. "What do you want?" I whispered. "I just want what's mine," he said. "You took something that doesn't belong to you. You turned me into the bad guy. But you don't understand. None of this is my fault." "Leave me alone, Ethan." He laughed, low and bitter. "That's not my name." Then the call ended. I woke my mom and Olivia immediately, shaking, telling them what happened. Olivia called the police while my mom locked all the doors. By the time officers arrived, there was no sign of him. No car, no lights, nothing. They searched the street, but he was gone. The next morning, Detective Carter called again. "We'll assign a patrol car to your area for the next few nights," she said. "But Emily, I need you to understand something. This man is escalating. He feels cornered, and that makes him dangerous." I didn't need to be told twice. For the next week, I barely left the house.
Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my pulse spike. I started documenting everything. Every message, every time I thought I saw a familiar car, every strange noise. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Then, just when things seemed unbearable, I got another email. This one wasn't from a throwaway Jess. It was from Rebecca. The subject line read, "We need to talk. It's about the kids." I hesitated, but I opened it. "Emily, I don't know who else to turn to. Ethan hasn't come home in 3 days. He took some documents from my drawer, passports, birth certificates, everything. I think he's planning to run. Please, if the police contact you, tell them to check bus stations and airports. He said something about starting over. I'm scared." My hands trembled as I read the message. He wasn't just trying to disappear, he was taking his entire family with him. I forwarded the email to Detective Carter immediately. She called within the hour. "We'll alert Border Control and airports," she said. "Thank you for sending this." That night, for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not peace exactly, but resolute. Ethan had taken enough from me, from all of us. It was time for him to face the consequences. The next morning, the police called again. They'd tracked a ticket purchase under one of his known aliases, a flight out of the country leaving in less than 12 hours. Carter asked me to come down to the station in case they needed my statement before moving in. When I arrived, she looked tense but focused. "We've got surveillance at the airport," she said. "If he shows up, we'll have him." The waiting felt endless. I sat in that small room, staring at the clock, feeling every second crawl by. Then, just after noon, the call came in. They'd found him. Ethan, or Eric, or whatever name he was using that week, was arrested at the airport while trying to board a flight under a fake passport. Rebecca and the kids were safe. When Carter told me, I felt my body finally exhale. The weight of months of fear, confusion, and betrayal poured out in one long breath. But it wasn't over yet. There would be a trial. There would be questions, testimonies, evidence. And I knew, deep down, that the hardest part wasn't what he'd done. It was learning to trust again after someone like him. Still, for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to hope. After the police arrested Eric for fraud and bigamy, I thought I'd finally feel free. But freedom felt strange after years of chaos. The silence of my new apartment was both peaceful and haunting. No more lies, no more drama, just me, my thoughts, and the occasional sound of rain hitting the windows. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with another lie from Eric, or to see his name flash on the screen. It didn't. It never would again. The trial took months. Every day I sat in the courtroom, watching him avoid my eyes. He looked thinner, older, like someone who had finally realized the weight of his own deception. The prosecutor laid out everything: the forged documents, the fake IDs, the secret family, the money he stole. His lawyer tried to paint him as a man who made mistakes under pressure, but the evidence was too strong. He'd built a life of lies, and the truth had finally buried him. When the judge read the sentence, 10 years in prison, Eric just stared at the floor. No tears, no reaction. I felt nothing for him anymore. The man I once loved didn't exist. He was a mask, a character in a script he wrote to get what he wanted. The real Eric was gone long before I ever found out about his double life. After the sentencing, Emily hugged me in the hallway. She had become like a sister to me. "You did it," she said softly. "You finally got your justice." "I didn't do it for revenge," I told her. "I did it so he couldn't do this to anyone else." And that was the truth. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I wanted closure. I wanted peace. And maybe in some quiet way, I wanted my story to warn others, to remind people that sometimes love blinds us, and trust can be the weapon that destroys us if placed in the wrong hands. Months passed, and I focused on rebuilding my life. I started writing again.
I hadn't realized how much I missed it. My therapist told me to pour my pain into words, so I did. I wrote about betrayal, lies, and healing. I wrote about how it feels when your world collapses and you have to find yourself in the rubble. Eventually, my blog started gaining followers. People from everywhere reached out, saying my story helped them see red flags they'd ignored, or gave them the courage to leave toxic relationships. One afternoon, I received an email from someone named Claire. Her message was short. "Hi. You don't know me, but I think we were both engaged to the same man. His name was Eric. Thank you for exposing him. You saved me." I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands trembling. It was both painful and healing to know there were
Others like me. Eric had woven his web around multiple women, all believing they were his only one. I wasn't alone. And maybe that's what made the pain bearable. We weren't stupid. We were victims of a master manipulator. Eventually, I was invited to share my story on a podcast about relationship fraud. It was terrifying to speak publicly about what happened, but I did it anyway. I told the host everything, from how I met Eric to how I discovered his secret family. Listeners flooded the comments with support, and even some with their own stories of betrayal. That's when I realized something profound. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about turning your scars into lessons. Years later, I met someone new. His name was Daniel, and he was nothing like Eric. He didn't rush me, didn't push for trust, didn't drown me in charm. He was quiet, patient, and kind. For months, I kept waiting for a lie to appear, for something to shatter the calm. But it never did. He was real, solid, honest. The first time I told him about my past, I expected him to pull away. Instead, he took my hand and said, "You don't owe anyone your trust right away. Take your time. I'll earn it." Those words broke me in the best way. I realized I'd spent so long preparing for betrayal that I'd forgotten what real love looked like. A year later, Daniel proposed. Nothing fancy, no elaborate setup, just the two of us walking by the river at sunset. He slipped a ring onto my finger and said, "I'm not promising perfection. I'm promising honesty." I said yes. As I stood there with the wind on my face, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who ignored red flags because she was afraid of losing love, the one who believed lies because she wanted them to be true. I wasn't her anymore. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, stronger, wiser, softer, but not weak. Before the wedding, I visited the prison once, not to see Eric, but to leave a letter. I gave it to the guard and asked him to deliver it to inmate number 87432. It wasn't a love letter or a note of forgiveness. It was a goodbye. It said, "You taught me that love without truth is poison. You took pieces of my life, but you didn't destroy me. You only showed me what I deserve. And it's so much more than you. Goodbye forever." Walking out of that building felt like closing the last chapter of a painful book. I didn't look back. Today, I help others tell their stories. My blog has turned into a full-time project where people share their experiences of betrayal and survival. Each post is a reminder that pain doesn't define us, it refines us. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what drove Eric to live that double life. Was it greed? Insecurity? Fear? Maybe I'll never know, but I've learned that some questions don't need answers. What matters is that I got mine: freedom, truth, and peace. And as I sit now, writing the final chapter of my story, I realize something beautiful. Betrayal didn't break me. It built me. The end.